Hello. Our story begins on Naos in the Outer Rim. There was a joint mission between two duos including Quinlan Vos and Aayla Secura, as well as Obi Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. The Jedi were usually far from the Outer Rim, but Naos, while in the Outer Rim, was attached to a hyperspace lane that went to the core. It was on the Corellia Run, and that started on Coruscant and ended at Naos. The only reason the mission was sanctioned was that a senator from Ryla supported the mission itself. The four Jedi were here on Naos to find a man stolen by a gang of pirates. There were notions that suggested the pirates also stole from a village on the side of Ryloth. It was, after all, the only reason Ryloth was invested. The man stolen from the planet was a philanthropist with a very large pocketbook. He could be exploited to give the pirates whatever they wanted, and the senator of Ryloth was hopeful that the Twi'lek billionaire could give back to his people. But with him gone, they wouldn't have the necessary funding to help fix issues inside of that village and elsewhere across the planet. The Jedi were highly invested in this. As they arrived on Naos, they found it to be a scummy backwater world, but there were much worse elements about it. There were traps everywhere, and the locals didn't take too kindly to outsiders, especially not Jedi. The Nile tore their homeworld to pieces over the years that they ruled the Outer Rim. What was once a society with the opportunity for success was nothing but a bundle of strewn together towns with little hope for making themselves known to the galaxy. Their only hope now was what they had, which was borderline nothing. Naos was nothing but smugglers, pirates, bounty hunters, common criminals, and thieves. Every child born into the terrible conditions here were raised to be like everyone else around them. The only way out was off-world. Those who were born and abandoned by their parents were left as outsiders, forced to fend for themselves and so forth. The sights were horrific to the four Jedi, but one of them remembered this, because Tatooine was similar enough to Naos. Not nearly as bad, but the 15-year-old Anakin Skywalker could remember what it was like only 6 years ago when he lived in the Dust Bowl of Mos Espa. The Jedi moved quietly through the village. Their ship was parked on the outskirts of the town so they wouldn't draw any attention. It was locked up and barricaded just in case. As they walked through the streets, the Jedi walked in order from left to right. Quinlan, Aayla, Obi Wan, and Anakin. Aayla had never met Obi Wan or Anakin before, but she had heard of both of them. She was 22 at the moment, not far from finally becoming a Jedi Knight, and she did look forward to the day. But she knew of Obi Wan because of Skywalker. Many Jedi knew that Obi Wan had taken Anakin out of some sort of promise. Mostly everyone looked up to Kenobi because of his selflessness, especially being put into the position he was in. Becoming a master wasn't easy. She was introduced to Skywalker and Kenobi on the way here. Of course, Quinlan and Obi Wan were used to being around each other, so the main introductory conversation on the way here revolved between Skywalker and Secura. As they walked down the street, one of the Naos traps ripped out from under the Jedi. Aayla and Obi Wan slipped down into the hole as Anakin and Quinlan fell to either side of it. The hole dragged both Aayla and Obi Wan down into a small cave, and they both quickly rolled off their shoulders and slid right to their feet. The two of them ignited their lightsabers and looked around. They were in the clear, but as a hole above them closed up, lights in the cave turned on and lit up the environment. The two Jedi turned to each other and then looked forward. Within an instant, the floor electrocuted and shocked both of them, knocking them both unconscious. Topside, Quinlan told Anakin to follow him as he ran forward, searching for a place to settle and choose a direction. They ran into an alley, and Quinlan turned back to Anakin and looked him in the eyes. He told him what had been said earlier, but added to it. This town was on the verge of exploding. If they used their weapons inside the town, they could ignite a fire that would turn every living being against them. After all, selling a lightsaber could win someone a lump sum of credits. There was no need to give anyone the chance to sell 4 of them. He was defending Anakin's life here, but in a way, it was depicting the failure of the Jedi. They cared more about their lightsabers than they did the citizens of the galaxy. This wasn't true, especially not with Quinlan or Anakin, but it did make for a nice metaphor. Hours would pass by and Aayla would wake up tied to Obi Wan. They'd be stuck inside of a cell together as chatter from local pirates woke her from her sleep. She woke up first, looking around and calming her mind. Quinlan may have been unorthodox, but he made a terrific point to make sure she knew that if she was ever captured or separated from him, to calm her mind, which is what she did. Aayla looked around and got a feel for their prison cell. She could see the walls of dirt, and as she turned her head slightly, using her eyes to scan the exterior, she knew what she was working with. She whispered quietly, asking Obi Wan if he was awake, and he wasn't. She could feel the restraints. They weren't much. The Force could break them. She closed her eyes, and then before breaking them, she stopped. The pirates were having their little session in another room, and one of them was stationed to stay guard. Aayla looked over and watched most of the pirates ferry out of the room. This was her moment. She used the force to release the grip on the chains and she popped up, quietly slipping over to the gate and wrapping her arm through the bar and pulling back on the person standing guard. She used the force to help sedate the man before dropping him to the ground silently without harming him. She turned back and pressed Obi Wan until he woke up. He was confused, just as she was when she woke up. She helped him up and the two of them quickly got out of the cell, grabbing their Jedi weapons and moving. Obi Wan suggested that the philanthropist was probably down here with them. She agreed and they moved out quickly. Aayla told him how many people were down here, or at least how many she could see when she took count. He took note of what she said and they sped around. As they were looking for the philanthropist, Kenobi stopped. He saw something sticking out of a crate. Aayla was moving forward and almost ran into him, but he slid the enclosing off the top of the box and looked at a calicori. It was bruised because of the lid being on top of it for so long. Obi-Wan pulled it out and looked at it. Aayla asked what he had, not being able to see the Twi'lek heirloom in his hands due to the shadow. Obi-Wan turned over and told her that they were collecting calicoris here on Naus, and they needed to be returned home. Aayla was surprised. She saw it, and she knew what it was instantaneously when she did see it. However, she was impressed that Obi-Wan was able to name it without hesitation, let alone know what it was by only seeing a corner of it sticking out of a box. A calicori was a very important family piece for every Twi'lek. It had their ancestry on it, a way for every Twi'lek to remember and treasure those that came before them. For someone anywhere else in the galaxy, it meant nothing, but for Twi'leks, it was a part of who they were. Obi-Wan held it and then looked inside the crate. There were others inside there too. He turned to Aayla and told her that they needed to take these back to Ryloth. She agreed, watching him gently handle the heirloom before continuing forward. They eventually found the philanthropist who was badly hurt. The two Jedi continued forward and eventually got the man to their ship. The caves led to the outskirts of the town, and the Jedi were able to get him inside and safe. While Aayla and Obi-Wan were doing this, Anakin and Quinlan were running around the town, avoiding hurting people and keeping themselves quiet. The townsfolk were starting to become antsy, but Quinlan was keeping it calm. They used the roofs of buildings, but found no way to find the other Jedi or the philanthropist. Once Aayla and Obi-Wan were topside and got the man inside their vessel, they contacted the other Jedi and informed them of everything, as well as the stolen goods inside the caves. Quinlan was not known for being the mature one, but suggested that they get out of here now, and then return for everything else. But Kenobi wanted to make sure the calicori were returned to Ryloth. The people of Naus wouldn't ever find value in them, and when they realized they couldn't be sold, they would turn to alternative methods. He was right, and so Quinlan and Anakin returned to the ship. Aayla and Obi-Wan went back inside the cave to find the calicori. Once they did, they made their own escape, though when they did, they were trailed. Due to interference inside the caves, they couldn't inform Quinlan or Anakin that they were indeed being chased. But Obi-Wan got behind Aayla, using his lightsaber to block shots as she pushed the crate out of the cave. The two of them were able to escape to the Jedi shuttle and escape Naus. When they returned to Ryloth, Obi-Wan and Quinlan deposited the billionaire to the capital where it could be taken care of. The Jedi then returned to the village where they could hand out the calicori to the families who lost theirs. It was such an empowering moment for the Jedi, though it was hard for the younger Jedi, especially being that both Aayla and Anakin were from the Outer Rim. She really appreciated how much Obi-Wan cared about the people on Ryloth. She may have been raised as a Jedi, and been just as a Jedi should be, but she understood how important the calicori was to her people. When she had a moment, she would express how grateful she was for his selflessness in the situation. He just smiled and moved along, not thinking anything of it, because why would he? The Jedi would return to Coruscant and they would have to deliver the information of their mission to the Council. All four Jedi would be present as both masters took a stand for the people of Naus and Ryloth. Something that neither Anakin or Aayla picked up on was the fact that the billionaire wasn't a philanthropist. He said he was, but that was really just a cover. A senator wouldn't care about him if he spent his money on the people. A senator, especially on Ryloth, would only care about him if he spent money on the senator, which is why the senator forced his hand with the Jedi. Obi-Wan and Quinlan were outraged, and then the students became equally as so once it was revealed. But as per usual, the message fell on deaf ears. The council, regardless of who was on it, had grown more complacent. The two duos split up and continued their own respective journeys. Aayla inversely became much more inquisitive about Obi-Wan Kenobi. He was, at least in her own mind, one of the most respectable Jedi the Order had. For someone like Quinlan, he could agree, which meant even more to her. Aayla Secura viewed Quinlan as close as she could to a father in her life. She saw him like one, and almost treated him as if he was her actual father. Because Quinlan and Obi Wan were the same age, she had a number of stories to tell her about their experiences together, even those that they had with Qui-Gon Jinn. Aayla appreciated learning about Obi Wan, but she never saw anything regarding him as instantaneously romantic. All of her adoration for him was respectful. Due to her respect for Obi Wan, she wished to spend more time around him to learn from him as well as her master. She didn't want to breach the bond between he and Anakin, but Obi Wan had become a little more loose with his own student. Kenobi, at least from what she had noticed prior to the mission on Naus, is that Obi Wan was inside the Jedi archives for hours in the morning. Anakin was a late riser anyways, and Obi Wan gave up on trying to wake him up early. Aayla only noticed this because she saw him in the archives every time she was in the archives in the early morning hours, at least when they were on Coruscant. What followed was her approaching him and asking if she could study at the same table as him, which he was perfectly fine with. However, they instantaneously became a distraction to each other. One question would lead to a conversation, and a conversation would lead to some laughs, and then another conversation, and then so forth. But it was all genuinely in a friendly manner. Aayla had no intention of it being anything other than that. She just wanted the chance to learn more about his perspective of the Jedi way. It would aid her greatly in her own journey as a Jedi, which was her intention to begin with. Obi-Wan never thought much of the entire scenario anyways, he just appreciated the company. For months this would continue on, obviously be on and off due to the fact that either Obi-Wan and Anakin would go on a mission or Quinlan and Aayla would go on a mission, but the main essence was that their friendship was growing. After another year or so, Aayla would become a Jedi Knight, and at 24, she was ready to begin doing missions on behalf of the people of the galaxy. She wanted to help, just as any Jedi did, but she didn't know where to start. For her, it was extremely difficult to separate from her master. Being that Quinlan was like her father, she wasn't sure if she was ready to move forward or not, but just as all Jedi must, she did. It was a part of their journey in their life as Jedi. Aayla accepted this and she began, though the change was certainly difficult to adjust to. Her solo missions kept her on Coruscant, working in the Undercity. She came across many Jedi during this time, though she wouldn't ever see Obi-Wan during these missions. Her friend had more assignments off-world than she, so their time together was limited, but it didn't necessarily mean anything different to her. She enjoyed his presence simply due to the companionship. It was an enticing time for her, learning so much not just about the galaxy but herself. Obi-Wan was still training Skywalker, and the young Jedi was growing into a formidable opponent. For Kenobi, it was becoming clear that he needed to help Anakin be a better Jedi. It was a commitment though, and Anakin wasn't making anything easier for Kenobi. He believed he was better than Obi-Wan, and his confidence only got the best of him. When the two friends finally reunited in the Jedi archives, as they had on numerous occasions, they were able to talk about what they'd experienced in their own respective journeys. Obi-Wan was excited to see how she was coming along, and then realized that perhaps it'd be best for the two of them to pair up. She'd be a great inspiration for Anakin. He was having a hard time with his Jedi training, and it wasn't that it was difficult, it was that he didn't want to listen. As a way to help Aayla and himself, Obi-Wan brought her along with him. They wouldn't spend every mission together, but for the ones that went outside of the temple to other planets, she would come along with them. This too would continue on for months, the two of them getting used to being around each other, and the truth is, it helped out all three of them in their own ways. While Aayla was beyond fine on her own, it was always nice to have friends on her journey, so having friends with her was very nice. Anakin was able to learn from Aayla in a different way than he was learning from Kenobi. Due to Obi-Wan being the quote-unquote master here, they were all going by his direction. Anakin was able to learn that he didn't have to argue with Obi-Wan every time he requested that they do something. And lastly, it helped Obi-Wan. Aayla was like a balance for him. Due to her being born and raised inside the Jedi Order, she was much more like him, but she also added to Anakin's training by assisting him with being less arrogant, something Obi-Wan continuously suffered through. During one of these missions, the trio was at Kashyyyk and they were attacked by a massive torrent attack, which led Obi-Wan to facing off against the massive beast. He pushed Anakin and Aayla back, saving them both from the animals that tried to strike. Kenobi's lightsaber ignited and he fended it off, telling the two Jedi to escape. He'd be right behind them. Anakin and Aayla wanted to help, but Obi-Wan, in a similar feat to that of Master Yoda, defeated the torrent attack by himself. He didn't kill it, he just scared it off. It was true what Anakin thought of his master. He was as wise as Master Yoda and as powerful as Master Windu. The showdown between Kenobi and the Beast lasted for several minutes, but he came out unscathed and it inspired both young Jedi. Kenobi was remarkable. But it was in this moment when Aayla realized that she may have felt more than just companionship for Obi Wan. She appreciated him more than she as a Jedi could understand or even express through words. When they returned to Coruscant from Kashyyyk, she took time to herself to reflect upon her emotions. The reality is, Jedi don't usually feel these emotions. For a lifelong Jedi especially, Aayla didn't really know how to conceptualize them at all. There was an extra beat in her heart when she saw Obi Wan, an extra thought in her mind when they spoke, words that never breathed into the light of day because they were too challenging to get out. She admired him, and now, at least since Kashyyyk, those feelings were something more. In her own self-reflection, she came around to trying to sort herself out. Were the emotions just a result of the attack from the Torrenta tech, or were they building until a moment and they bursted? She did everything a Jedi should do. Her first attempt to sort out the matter came with meditations, and then she found herself at the tree in the temple garden. Finally, she just decided to confront her master regarding the issue. It wasn't the easiest or most comfortable conversation in the world, not because it was awkward. Her and Quinlan had a very open bond with each other, and he emphasized that he never wanted her to feel that way, but it was just kind of weird. She slowly weaved her way through the words and he understood the picture. He was able to relate to her and express that these feelings were natural, even for Jedi. It was up to them if they wanted to follow them or not. He referenced what Qui-Gon and a couple of other Jedi had done in their own respective lives. Some of them embraced it, some of them left it behind, while others kept it near and dear, but never let it grow. He suggested that she follow her heart and the Force. It was the best she could do for herself. Part of her wanted to tell him who it was, but she knew it might be odd for him to hear. He could kind of tell that she wanted to say something, but was withholding it. Quinlan asked her if she'd like to share anything else with him, and she decided that she wouldn't tell him who it was. Not in a disrespectful way, but just in a keeping it to herself way. He was perfectly cool with that, and the Jedi Master and Apprentice split up. Aayla then decided that she'd take some time outside the temple, and at night, she went to Monument Plaza in the center of the city, where the only visible piece of Coruscant was present. It was the tippy top of Mount Umayyad. It was closer to sunset when she got there. Initially, it was quiet, but then it started to fill up again. She was honestly just people watching, while letting her thoughts dictate what she was hoping to become of the situation. She didn't know what would come next, but she was hopeful that whatever choice she made, that it would lead to a good outcome. A number of her thoughts centered on how as a Jedi, she shouldn't do it, or the fact that in doing so, she would be forced from the Jedi Order. But as she watched the night move along further, she realized she kept locking on the duos of people. These duos of course being couples. It didn't matter what type of couple it was. Whenever she saw people locking hands, she thought of how beautiful it was in its own way. She had seen it before, all across the galaxy with various groups of people and citizens of the galaxy, and she never understood. She now thought that she did. It all made sense to her, and she decided that it was her choice to now take a step forward, into not just unknown territory, but accepting emotions that a Jedi wasn't supposed to accept. It was a scary step forward, but she did take it. The following day, she'd have time in the archives with her friend, and she'd think about how she would say it. But then, she'd back out of it. How does one initiate that talk, or even, how? She found humor in herself stumbling over the thoughts day after day after day. She was grateful that she seemingly had all the time in the world. One night she got an idea, and the next day she tested it, suggesting that after they were in the archives, they go to the garden and meditate. Obi Wan was okay with it, and he was willing to go along with her. When they meditated, he could feel something that he hadn't noticed from her before. Obi Wan wasn't alien to these feelings. He had shared them years before on Mandalore. He had people who fancied him, and there was only one person he ever considered loving back. He just didn't know if Aayla was being intentional with this through the meditation. Was she doing this on purpose, or was she just releasing her whole self to the Force so that she could be open and potentially find peace with her newly found adoration? He never made a mention of it, which entirely backfired on her part. She was hoping that perhaps he would have the words to say, or at least notice it, but nothing came. She reached out to stop him, and he did, turning around with sincereness in his eyes. He asked if she wanted to speak about her emotions, and she did, but it had become clear from his tone that the feelings were not necessarily reciprocated. He expressed that he hoped it wouldn't create tension between them, because he really enjoyed her company, and she was perfectly fine with keeping the status quo. He let her down easily, and she would have to learn how to move on. But her adoration didn't slip, and the thought she planted into Obi-Wan's mind didn't either. He found the idea of it sweet, but he hadn't ever thought of her in such a light. It was kind of blindsiding for him. He never thought it would come from their little dynamic, but it was kind of nice in a way. It had been nearly 2 decades since he last saw Satine, which meant the same amount of time since something so rich and deep happened between him and another person. This was different. They weren't constantly in a life or death situation, though just because Obi Wan didn't reciprocate didn't mean he didn't appreciate it. The revelation gave him time to think about things, but he wouldn't ever go too deep into thinking about them. For him, it was pleasant, but they continued just going along just as they had before, almost as if nothing had happened. Aayla didn't latch onto it in a toxic way. She just kept her heart open to it, and she didn't break herself down over the quote-unquote rejection. She accepted it and moved on healthily. She thought that perhaps there would be a day when something could come from it, but that day wouldn't be today, and that was okay. Aayla and Obi Wan continued to be close friends for the following years up until the beginning of the Clone Wars. It was during the war when the two of them were separated indefinitely, and Obi Wan realized how much she actually did care for her. He couldn't deny it now, especially as being separated, with both she and him leading respective armies into combat. The war would drag Kenobi to Ryloth, where he'd be brought back to the place he and Aayla were on when they distributed the calicori to the people. During this mission, he would be reminded of how deep their friendship had gone, and he remembered that on one of their many missions, she mentioned that she never had a calicori. Her family did, but she never met them or knew them. Considering the newfound emotions Obi Wan was harboring, he believed it'd be a nice little gift for her. Before he left the village, he asked the people if they might create him an heirloom for her, so that she might have something of traditional value. They agreed, and they made one. She may have not had anything relating to a family inside of the Order, but this gift would mean a lot to her. She was someone who highly valued traditions of her people and respected them greatly. When she got the gift, it gave her mixed signals, but she appreciated it and kept it close with her, no matter where she went. She really did love the gift. Aayla spent her entire life valuing the traditions of her people, and never once was she gifted a calicori. This meant more than the galaxy to her. However, due to the nature of the heirloom, it made her wonder if there was something else implied. Was Obi Wan trying to send her a signal that he wanted to be a part of the first generation of this particular family lineage, or was it just a gift? They wouldn't have much time to talk about it as the war would drag them across the galaxy. When they did talk about it, they were both exhausted, and so instead of getting the answer she wanted, they'd spend their first few minutes chatting on the war or their missions or their experiences, and then subsequently they'd fall asleep on the communication device. Good thing neither of them were sleep talkers. During the war, Kit Fisto would save Aayla Secura's life, but nothing would ever come from that. Towards the end of the war, Aayla would be the first to hear from Obi Wan after he left Mandalore. They'd been keeping up with everything at this point, and they hadn't fully fleshed out a feeling for a relationship yet. But it was clear they had a romantic attraction to each other, just some tension in between. There hadn't been any mention of Satine from Obi Wan's side of things, but it probably had something to do with why he was taking things so slowly. He was split. But when Satine died in front of him, there wasn't really any chance for that to go anywhere, was there? He had to let go, but there wasn't really a clear indication made by Obi Wan that he had. So, Satine died, feeling as if he had moved on, but hoping that their feelings had been the same for the last 20 or so years. After all, it's why there was no successor to her throne. Kenobi would tell Aayla about the entire debacle on Mandalore, and while she may have never met Satine, she believed she died because of the Jedi Way. Aayla knew that there was a bond between Obi Wan and Satine, but never knew how deep it was. Once everything was revealed to Aayla about the whole scenario, not the romantic part, she felt a deepening hole in her heart. Satine died because of the Jedi Way. Obi-Wan's loyalty to the Code would submerge Mandalore into civil war for who knows how long. Aayla had been slipping away from the Jedi. Due to their original mission on Naus, she felt like the Jedi were neglecting the galaxy. The Council had 3 years to do anything on Naus, and they didn't. The war came, and in 2 years they hadn't done anything. Now Mandalore, a previously prosperous neutral system because of Satine, was going to suffer because of the Jedi Way. This was less her blaming Obi-Wan and more so her blaming the Jedi Way for tricking Obi-Wan to allow that to happen. She expressed to Obi-Wan that she would like to separate from the Jedi Order. If he didn't want to, she would understand, but it would be Obi-Wan's decision to join her in leaving the Order if he wanted. He too had questioned his own decisions and even felt what she was feeling. Having someone as strong and courageous as her lead the way, he felt the rationale behind his own feelings to even follow it. After all, it was Kenobi who made the decision to lie to Anakin about faking his death, and he felt that that was terribly against his character. So, taking Ayla's words, he decided to abandon the Jedi Order with her, both of them going back to Ryloth. They would join Cham Syndulla and the rest of the Twi'leks in the protection of the planet. Aayla and Obi-Wan wouldn't see much conflict, but being they were former Jedi, Cham welcomed them openly and even gave them a place to stay in the capital. He understood that they had left the Jedi Order, and that they were going to protect the planet until the war was over. What followed would drastically change everything, because not more than a week or so after Secura and Kenobi left the Order, Ahsoka would be thrown out. She would be set free, but she would decide to leave, which inevitably would lead to Anakin deciding that the Jedi way wasn't for him. He felt lost, and in an effort to find peace within himself, he went to Naboo, where Padme took him. The two of them would stay on Naboo for about a month together. Padme would have to return to the Senate, but Anakin would be saved from all harm in the war. The support from his wife helped him feel better. However, he still wondered where Ahsoka might be. She was gone from everything, and so he returned to Coruscant to find his former student. There'd be few interactions with Palpatine, but Anakin was kind of done with him as well. After all, it was Palpatine who tried her. It may have been his job, but he didn't do anything to help the situation, now did he? Palpatine noticed this, and then used it to turn Skywalker into more of a vessel of darkness. Anakin would stay on planet searching for Ahsoka for a number of months, all the way up until the Battle of Coruscant. When the battle came, he heard a rumor that a group of separatists were gunning for Ryloth, and in an effort to make sure his former master was safe, he told Padme that he would move to the planet to help out. At this point, with a number of months having passed by, Aayla and Obi Wan had well acquainted themselves with each other. They were finally able to have some peace. It was weird for the first few weeks, especially being that peace was so abstract as generals. They often worried about their clone commanders and their troops, but both Cody and Bly would fare well, even without them, which was true. Their lives went from chaotic to pure in the span of 24 hours, and they had to adjust. Having each other around helped them with the adjusting period, but it still was difficult. Though what was most rewarding, aside from having each other, was being able to exist like normal people. They still had Jedi clothes, but they traded them in for regular citizen wear, and it was really nice to be treated like regular people. They were a part of society, and thanks to Cham, they could enjoy what was closely resembling upper-class lifestyle on Ryloth. Though both Secura and Kenobi admitted that they would prefer to earn their way to the top, Cham would arrange such things for them, but it wouldn't be difficult, especially considering Obi Wan was one of the few Jedi who liberated Ryloth at the beginning of the war. When Anakin found the happy couple, he was obviously a bit surprised, but he was glad to see them. His timing of things would offset everything. Sidious planned on using him, but because the Jedi couldn't use him, it changed literally everything. Sidious was going to turn Anakin full against the Jedi, telling them he learned of a conspiracy and so forth. If Anakin hadn't left the Order, the Council would have used him to spy on the Chancellor, but because he wasn't around, and they were thrown off schedule due to the Battle of Coruscant, the Jedi and Sith were left to their own dealings. Instead of playing politics, the Jedi took over the Senate and Palpatine, forcing him to surrender. Anakin never had nightmares about Padme either. This pulled everything to a stop, and the Jedi were left looking like the aggressors. But it actually worked. They were winning the war. The Separatists were on their heels, thanks to Sidious's planning. Grievous was located on Utapau thanks to transcripts inside of Palpatine's computer. Not to mention, the Jedi discovered Sith artifacts inside of his office. How'd they miss that? Who knows? But they got him. Palpatine was never seen or heard from ever again, which definitely created some distrust for the Jedi, but they brought the war to a literal end. Mace Windu killed Grievous, and the major battlefronts across the galaxy were Republic victories by a landslide. The Jedi used this politically on Coruscant, but they were also able to use extremely old codes from the Republic to denounce Palpatine's rule as a former Sith. Maul was the last of the Sith, considering Dooku was killed during the Battle of Coruscant when he was hit with an ARC-170 when it was clipped and slammed into his personal quarters on the flagship. The Jedi Order would deal with Maul when they realized that he was in control of Mandalore, but that wouldn't be now. Though most of this, aside from the ending of the Clone Wars, would concern those who left the Order. Ahsoka would be shocked to learn of what had gone down, and at that she would deny joining the Order again, instead continuing her own journey across the galaxy. Anakin was able to keep in contact with Ahsoka due to her going back to the Order to find him. He did also take up issue with the Jedi over Palpatine's disappearance, but learning that he was a Sith made the situation a little bit more bearable. Skywalker would return to Padme and build a life with her. On Ryloth, Aayla and Obi Wan would stay. Their bond had taken time to get to this point, but that was the gift of a slow burn. It didn't fizzle out in a furious smoke. It continued burning, and at least for them, it only got brighter. They both wished that they had realized earlier and left the Order earlier, but it wouldn't matter. They made up for the lost time perfectly well. It was odd because despite all their closest friends being Jedi, they were some of the most open Jedi around. Anakin was no longer a Jedi, neither was Ahsoka, and while Quinlan was the furthest thing from a regular Jedi, as it was, Their dynamic was accepted and even praised for having survived what many other relationships in the Jedi Order didn't survive. It wasn't something uncommon for Jedi to catch feelings for one another. However, most of them would use their loyalty to the Code as reasoning for not leaving the Order and for abandoning their own feelings. Aayla and Obi Wan did not. The next 8 years of their lives would be helping the Syndulas build what had been lost, and watch corrupt senators like Ta get thrown from office. The Republic started to heal. Therefore, worlds around the galaxy started to enjoy that same healing. Aayla and Obi-Wan's relationship continued to blossom as they continued helping out the people of Ryloth as well as people around the Outer Rim. There were questions that came up in the relationship, such as Aayla asking if Kenobi wanted to go to his original home world, but he felt no call to. They considered moving to the core, but truthfully, they preferred it out here. There was a certain aura of peacefulness. Without the bustle of the core, Ryloth provided a sanctuary from the harsh political environment left behind by the war. They'd find themselves on Naboo from time to time, and seeing Anakin and Padme with children was often interesting, but as is a way with a slow burn, there is no need to rush it. Instead, Aayla and Obi-Wan took their time, and after those said 8 years, they'd have their first child, and it would be more than enough for them. Their son would be the first addition to their family Calicori, a tradition that now mother and father would be able to enjoy for years to come. It would be great, because all the Jedi that were close to them were in their own relationships. Quinlan had since left the Order, and Ahsoka eventually found someone after years of bouncing around the galaxy on her own adventure. Every year, all the former Jedi would gather up on one of the 4 selected worlds and have a feast and a vacation for a week. The planets were Naboo, Kifu, Onderon, and Ryloth. Though this didn't stop them, because once they got older and each respective couple had kids, they had more family-friendly locations to go to. All of them would be pleased with the decision to move away from the Jedi Order. And despite the varying ages between the families and kids, they all got along with each other. Luke and Leia being the oldest, but the youngest Skywalker being the youngest out of everyone. It all worked out, and all the couples were greatly happy with each other. Just as it was with Luke and Leia, and eventually Aayla and Obi-Wan's son, all the kids were highly attuned to the Force, so all of them would be trained by their parents and taught how to wield laser swords and so forth. It was really the best life. Aayla and Obi-Wan would live out their life on Ryloth, eventually watching their son move on to start his own family. By the time Aayla and Obi-Wan became one with the Force, they were able to see 2 more generations added to the Calicori Obi-Wan gave his dearly beloved. Thanks to an old friend, all those close to the Force would be able to stay around. This included Anakin, Ahsoka, Quinlan, Asajj, and of course Aayla and Obi-Wan. The Kenobi family would live on, passing down the story of how their great-grandfather gifted the Calicori to their great-grandmother, in a testament of true love. And that, my friends, is our Valentine's Day special. Again, special thanks to our patrons: Galvin Gaming, Tristan Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewu 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny DeGuin, Sith Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Gunley 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, Fortis Like Star Wars, Airbus, Rex Wolf, Man 3 First Names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and then we smash that like button. If you want to support me in other ways, go check out the other things down below. Otherwise, let's start the story. Haven't done a love story in a while. They're lots of fun. This was fun for me, actually, because I wanted to challenge myself. I've never written from the female's perspective in the story, and so I wanted to challenge myself to do that. And so I wanted it to be from Aayla's perspective. I don't think Obi-Wan would initially fall for it. Their age gap is a year less than Han and Leia, I think, or it's the same amount, and so I didn't want to rush it. I thought it would be better if it naturally kind of played out over the years, and I think that Obi-Wan wouldn't initially go for it. I think he'd find it very endearing, but I think a relationship with both Obi-Wan and Aayla has to build, because both of them are really, really respectable Jedi. Both of them aren't just the type of people to fall away from the Order, and I think it'd be a domino effect to get them to not just fall in love with each other, but to actually fall away from the Order. So I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.